good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are coming in from. Thank you for joining us for today's special Megacast event, the Nutanix Thanksgiving Megacast. This is our first dedicated Megacast, and we're thrilled to have Nutanix joining us today for what's going to be a smorgasbord of great information. We're going to talk today about success recipes for building your hybrid cloud environment. And these are things that every organization is looking at because they're critical for moving forward, particularly with transformation efforts and all the other good things that are happening today. We have some housekeeping items we need to get out of the way before we get started. First of all, we have a number of great prizes that we'll talk about shortly that we're going to give away today. Winners will be announced in the Q&A box and on Twitter. You don't have to actually put a question into the Q&A box to ask who won. We will be announcing it in Q&A and on Twitter, and we'll be reaching out to people after the event on how to claim their prizes. If you have questions, we want to hear from you. So in the ON24 control panel at the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A tab. We want to make sure that you ask every question that's on your mind of all of today's presenters. We have time built into our schedule for Q&A, so please make sure you ask any question that you may have on your mind about today's presentation. We also would like you to participate on Twitter. If you choose to do so, then please use the hashtag ThanksgivingCast for this particular event. And we look forward to hearing from all of you on Twitter as well. And we also have a number of handouts. And you'll see in the handouts area of your control panel that there are copies of all of today's slides available for you to download so you can take a look at this information at your leisure after the event. So please make sure you download those handouts. There's some great information in there. Now, we have some things we have to talk about winning prizes. I'll talk about the prizes in a second, but I'm going to talk about the rules first. So for winning prizes, you have to be live here. And if you're listening to me, then you are able to win a prize, which is good. Winners do have the option to make a donation to a selected charity instead. So if you win one of the prizes, rather than taking the prize, we'll be happy to make a donation in your name to a charity of your choice. If you win a prize that's valued at over $600, or you've won other prizes from Actual Tech Media this year that put you over $600 in aggregate for the year, you are required to provide us with a Form W-9. Unfortunately, the IRS will then require us to send you a 1099 at the end of the year. That is the federal law. Unfortunately, we're not able to work around that. We have some great prizes today. We have 6 Nintendo Switches we'll be giving away throughout the event. And at the end of the event, I'm actually kind of jealous. We're giving away what you see on your screen, which is that Galaga cabinet. This is not just Galaga, though. This is actually a full-size arcade cabinet like many of us grew up with, and it has over 400 games that are preloaded into the console. We will actually ship that to your house, most depending on where you live, of course. No, we will ship it to your house. I'm kidding. And you'll be able to have some pretty awesome Christmas present for somebody or for yourself. So we're looking forward to that as well. If you have questions about our prize policies, please refer to the link you see on your screen, www.actualtechmedia.com/MC prize terms conditions with dashes between all of the words. If you do want to donate money to a charity instead of taking the prize, we have a number of charities that we've selected that will be very worthy of your funds. The Hunger Project, Reading the Fundamental, Toys for Tots, given the time of year, Cancer Research Institute, Meals on Wheels. Lots of great organizations that are really in dire need of funds that we're happy to help support should you so choose. And as I mentioned, we are going to be active on social media. If you'd like to follow Actual Tech Media, we're at Actual Tech Media on the Twitters. And I am at Other Scott Lowe. And the hashtag for today's event, once again, is ThanksgivingCast. Before we get started with presentations, let's talk a little bit about what we're actually going to be talking about today. You know these challenges that we have all too well. We have trouble a lot of times achieving real balance in our organizations as far as it pertains to our lives as well. We often talk about this as work-life balance, but we would like to have some semblance of sanity in our lives. At least most of us would. Some people thrive on insanity, but not all of us do. But you have systems that are running from things like 8 different vendors, requiring your constant attention. You always are running around having to call different vendors. make sure everything works well together. So there could be some challenges here that we have to overcome. And I'm sure that many of us are very familiar with the idea that we have to spend certain holidays or holiday periods in an office instead of with family, especially in the world of IT. That's when we're going to do things like applying significant upgrades, patching, all the good stuff that comes along with managing IT when we need significant downtime. A lot of organizations, we have holidays that are spent, unfortunately, in the office rather than with family. And at the same time, as we're trying to do all this, business leaders are telling us we need more from IT. We want better profitability. We want higher levels of customer satisfaction. We want faster time to market for new initiatives. And at the same time, you're trying to balance all the other stuff we just talked about. We have the business coming and saying, hey, that's great, but we want more. So to achieve these goals, they do rely on IT. There's lots of opportunities in the modern digital technology frontier that we can exploit to try to accelerate the business even more quickly than we have in the past. But this does force IT to be focused more on the business results rather than the technology. And that's not something we've always done. I think most organizations have made every effort to do that, but we've been forced back into sort of looking at the bits and the bytes because of the way we've often had to put our data centers together. And we're also at the same time that we're trying to do all of these things, being asked to reduce spending and increase overall efficiency. So there's lots of dueling priorities here that we have to try to balance, and also at the same time that we're trying to achieve a better overall work-life balance. So how do you help your business and yourself achieve these goals? And that means you can maybe spend some time playing Galaga at home. We have a great event lined up today that's going to help you understand some of what we just talked about. So we're going to start with the main course. We're going to talk about Nutanix AHV, where we talk about don't manage the management. And you'll learn about what AHV is and why it can be important for your organization. We'll move on to talk about Nutanix Calm. And this is where we're going to bring everyone to the table with application-centric management. This is something new from Nutanix, and it's pretty exciting. Now we have a side dish. This is where we're going to talk about securing your applications, large and small. Application security is critical in today's world. More and more, we're seeing lots of news of big data breaches that are pretty horrendous when it comes to PR and the bottom line. And by helping secure applications from front to back, we are able to provide our organizations with a little bit more semblance of security. And then we have applications. So applications taste delicious when talking about hyper-converged infrastructure. So we're going to mix this with a little bit of hyper-convergence, so we're going to have a session on that. And to get us going on this, we're going to introduce Mike Ronsky, who is with the AHV and Virtualization and Networking product team with Nutanix. Mike, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. And thank you to everyone for joining us this morning or this afternoon. So again, I'm Mike Ronsky. I'm on the products team. I focus on the virtualization and networking space. I've been around the virtualization ecosystem for quite a while. And what we really want to talk to you guys about today from the AHV side is not just what AHV is, but why we think it's important to have a stack like Nutanix does. I know not all of you are familiar with Nutanix, so we'll start off with a quick 2 seconds, maybe it's a minute and a half or so, of primer on what Nutanix is and what we do. You may be familiar with Nutanix in the HCI space or hyperconverged. That seems to be the buzzword that everyone's using these days, and all of the other vendors in this space, all of virtualization space, are all talking about hyperconverged. Even the big analysts like Gartner are focusing on this. And what the hyperconverged piece was is where Nutanix really cut our teeth, was starting off as how we simplify things. And the entire essence of this cast is, if we're going to give you back more time, the way to give you more time back for other more important things, or what's really important is spending time with family over the holidays, is to make things simpler. And that's really a key tenet to what we do at Nutanix. So HCI was our first step. And the way we make things simpler with HCI is we take the more complex virtualization stacks that we've all been using for the past at least 10 plus years now, where we had servers, storage networks, storage controllers, all, and convert that down into an appliance model that delivered all of the desired virtues of these complex IT stacks, meaning we had full function and high performance storage, we had replication, all of these details that we expect to have are all there. But what I don't have is the large complexity of management plus huge domains of expertise. We do not no longer have to have specific storage vendor domain expertise, specific virtualization vendor expertise. These things are converging together into the platform that Nutanix provides. And that's where we see that kind of appliance model piece that we're showing here on the slide, where we're getting this all down into simple appliances. And for that was what we're known for. And we see a lot of that in the HCI market, but we stopped and said, well, can we take that a little bit further? We think about cloud, hybrid cloud, public cloud. That's a big topic of today. And it is our viewpoint and opinion that all of us really understand what public cloud is. We know what a good idea of what Azure and AWS offer, maybe not at the detailed implementation level, we understand the service pieces. And then we hear a lot of talk about private cloud or hybrid cloud. But honestly, we feel that in order to have one of those, you have to first well define and redefine the private cloud before you can ever have hybrid. So our first kind of step into that was, let's make sure that our stack aligns well. So when I start talking about that, we have AHV is a virtualization piece that Nutanix provides. So by virtualization piece, think of it as an analog to Microsoft's Hyper-V or VMware's ESXi, covering the same features and functions that you'd expect out of a hypervisor. But we're converging that into our stack as well, so that it just becomes just as invisible as the other pieces that we converge from that three-tier piece. Thinking a little bit about Nutanix, so before we dig deeper, I want to give you a quick, let me build these out real quick, primer on what Nutanix really is. We're not a startup anymore. We went public last year. We have over 7,000 customers, a large portion of the global 2,000, so it's almost 600 of the global 2K are using Nutanix pieces present in lots of countries, and covering all kinds of workloads. When Nutanix started out, we focused on VDI as a good turnkey application to get people used to and understand what we do. But today, the enterprise applications, Oracle databases, SQL Server, etc., all of these things are very common use cases across Nutanix. And with our AHV hypervisor, that's only been out for a couple of years now, as of our last fiscal reporting quarter, over 24% of all of our outstanding nodes, people are choosing to go with our hypervisor as opposed to what the traditional ones were. And hopefully by the end of this brief cast section, you'll have a good understanding of why. So the title of this section was, don't manage the management. And you may be wondering, okay, we're talking about hypervisors and virtualization, but what does Mike really mean by that? And I started this off with a little thought exercise. And I've got this list of common tasks that, that people see in their virtualization piece. Is it load balancing, security pieces, orchestration? We're going to talk about Nutanix Calm later. It really falls into that bucket. But interestingly enough, if I break these into where they really fall, are they truly a hypervisor feature, or is it about the management stack above that? And we start pulling these things out, you realize that the management stack really is where all the time we spend is. It is not necessarily a hypervisor feature that we work with. We interact with the management stack, and that's where the value comes in. By making management easier, everything else kind of flows from that. So while you're thinking about that, let's dig into this a little bit deeper, and we talk about how we converge all these things. So if we were to ask you what you would deploy today as part of your current virtualization stack, you're going to see column things from the left here. You're going to start off with some storage services and storage. You have to have a hypervisor or some level of virtualization, and there's some VM management applications. So VM management, that's kind of the base minimum viable product for virtualization. But above that, we need more and more tools. We want to have advanced monitoring. We want to do capacity planning. I want to understand where my applications are performing. So I start looking at both products from my virtualization vendor, products from a broader ecosystem, and keep going up that stack to things like capacity planning, getting more and more features and functions that are truly, I would say, are required for running any kind of data center at scale. It's not just about running a handful of VMs these days. Almost everything we do is virtualized, and a lot of organizations are moving closer and closer to that last couple % of things that were not virtualized in their environment. So these become all critical components to that. So we talked about how Nutanix pulls these things together into maybe three simpler pieces. All of the storage functions, including things like block storage and file services. And if you were paying attention to our most recent announcements out of our European .next conference, we announced things like object storage, so S3 compatible object storage along with file and block. Almost any storage service you can imagine is provided as part of the Nutanix stack, And we have virtualization as incorporated into this. And then, lastly, managing all of this through a centralized repository, including things that are traditionally part of external products or broader parts of virtualization vendors' ecosystems. And that kind of pulls us down into talking about all of this in terms of cloud or private cloud or enterprise cloud. And why I like to bring this up here is that if we talk about or think about public cloud in terms of all this, these are all just services. I can grab a storage service from a public cloud. I can grab a virtualization or VM service from a public cloud. I don't really care about the brand of the hypervisor. I may not even know what hypervisor my cloud vendor is using, and maybe I don't care. My main concern is it delivering the SLAs and services that I want, and does it fit my business and cost model? And so that's really how we like to look at enterprise cloud or private cloud in our environment. So we take this long list of different pieces. So whether it's the virtualization piece, configuration, security, deeper analytics, so that we can make sure that we're getting a value and spend for our money. New technologies like container services and insights, and all of these things become services in our cloud infrastructure that we want to provide. And then we expect that to run on-prem, but ideally we'd like to have that stretch across all public cloud infrastructures as well. So I'm hoping you're going to join us for all of the sessions today, and we'll talk a little bit more about how Nutanix views this extension of what we're doing on-prem to what we're going to do off-prem, as far as extensions out to these public cloud providers like Amazon AWS or the Google Cloud. So when I talk about AHV, and AHV is our virtualization solution, it is included at no additional charge with the Nutanix stack. So what's interesting about Nutanix is we do support multiple hypervisors. So with Nutanix, you can use VMware, you can use Hyper-V, you can use XenServer or AHV. It is just our general view and opinion that if you can consolidate some of those other pieces and complexity by removing the external virtualization, there are benefits to be had there. And so what I'll talk about here is, what are those benefits to having a truly native integrated hypervisor into the platform? And so the first one in that area is performance. So what are we getting from a performance perspective? I can now ensure that everything about my virtualization infrastructure is deeply linked to my storage tier. In Nutanix case, that's our distributed storage platform that we provide through that HCI solution. And so things like next generation technologies, whether that's NVMe or Intel's 3D XPoint, these are ultra low latency flash pieces. When we think about traditional 3-tier and SAN, our networks, even a 10 gig network, can never really compete with the latency that's delivered by these high performance flash pieces. So if I want to take advantage of those, I need to look at HCI. And in the past, the network was the bottleneck. And with these super ultra low latency pieces, the virtualization tier could become the bottleneck. So what we've done with Nutanix and AHV is make sure that we've totally optimized that path, that we get the benefit of these next-gen technologies in our platform without any part of the software stack becoming the bottleneck. The second big advantage to having this native piece is how we can visualize the environment. I'm sure many of you are operating management consoles, either from your virtualization vendor or from a third party. And then you connect that up to, say, a management feed from, say, your storage vendor, management feed from your networking vendor, or you're using independent consoles. That becomes a case where a lot of finger pointing. You have to do correlation of events within your own head or a team around the table and then point the finger of guilt. But when it's a tightly integrated stack from storage, networking to virtualization, that single console provides the visibility that everybody can share. So everybody's looking at the same information, the same details. We no longer have to worry about independent consoles providing their own view of the world that causes confusion and essentially ends up taking longer time to resolve problems. If we want more of our own time back, we want to spend less time fighting about whose problem it is and really getting the problem solved. And lastly, when we have this rich data, now we're getting into things like, what can we do with that data beyond just displaying it to the operators and admins? Can we make things even more simple by applying the machine learnings or artificial intelligence concepts to provide insights that are not as obvious? Maybe they're because they're happening over the long term, that they're not easily visible over short gaps. And that's one of the areas where you're probably familiar with VMware feature called DRS, which is known for load balancing and resource contention. Nutanix is using that machine learning concept for our version of that, which we call ADS, or Acropolis Distributed Scheduler, to not only react to when there is resource contention, as far as a reactionary process, but what about thinking about that as a preventative model where we see load happening at a high level every month because of, say, monthly reporting schedules and things. And why don't we rearrange the environment and remove that contention before it ever happens? And that's where machine learning comes in, is taking that proactive approach to different pieces. And we're going to see a lot more happening with machine learning, I think, in this entire space over the next couple of years, just making the lives of the operators easier, from everything from this kind of problem avoidance to capacity planning, et cetera. Really, machine learning will take the primary role there. So another value of having a deeply integrated product is security. So when I'm deploying 10 different applications that have their own operating systems, their own independent software life cycles that are based on completely different software stacks, they're all going to have their own security feeds, their own security updates, a lot of general complexity in just managing that aspect alone. What Nutanix has done is we understand that these can be complex. So we already have this concise platform that's tightly integrated. Why not ship it secure from factory? Why not take the extra step is to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to harden and secure something. With our AHV hypervisor, one of those things is let's remove all of the unnecessary components of the virtualization stack. Nutanix doesn't have to integrate with a ton of third-party storage vendors per se, so we don't have to support all their different APIs of it. So not just hide those pieces, but let's rip them out of the software, make sure they're not there, and that reduces our attack surface. So as part of our general process is reduce the software footprint, make sure we only is what's necessary, security harden that to the best we can from the factory to ensure that things like vulnerability scans are going to pass. We're not shipping anything with anything vulnerable as far as we can tell, and create security guidelines that are part of doing that. So how do we harden and secure that? And we took that one step further, which is programmatically taking those security hardening guides and making them native to the system, so that not only is it ship secure, if someone changes the security configuration on a Nutanix platform, that is noticed from a compliance check, and it can be automatically set back. So an example of maybe opening firewall ports on the hypervisor server that don't need to be opened, noticing that and setting it back, or adding additional local administrative users outside of using AD. Those are automatically noticed and can be configured back, which is a huge benefit. And then we take that a step further and make sure the platform is providing features and functions that help you secure your applications further. So one of those things is data at rest encryption. We want to be able to prevent, maybe there's drive theft. I think eventually hardware can fail as well. So if a drive fails, I don't want that drive going out of my system because it was a repair and falling into the wrong hands. So data at rest encryption falls into that role where all the bits and bytes that are on the drives and in these systems can be encrypted. And Nutanix provides features around both doing that at the hardware level with special purpose SED drives, or at a software level, which provides the same level of, or similar level of security without the additional cost, because the self-encrypting hardware drives can be considerably more expensive than the software. You're doing it from a software-only perspective. A little further up the stack, the software-defined networking is a popular topic, and one of the most popular features of that is being able to have fine-grained networking controls within the environment. And by that I mean very, very granular control over which VMs can talk to each other. And when we think about this at a macro scale, managing a ton of IPs and firewall roles can be very complex. So when we talk about how we can make this simpler when providing this micro segmentation or micro firewalling features and functions, is to make sure that we can set policies at more of a macro level. I want high-level policies between the DMZ and internal, or between dev, test, and production, or maybe between tiers of an application, so between the web tier, the middle tier, and a database tier, and not have to worry about managing IPs and things, because that tightly integrated hypervisor in the virtualization side is always aware of things like MAC address and IP. So why make the admin have to deal with that? Let the admin deal with high-level policies, and let the underlying almost omnipotent infrastructure that is aware of everything take care of those pieces. And if someone changes an IP or deploys a new VM into one of those areas, security just follows because the policies are set at that macro level, which again, in the same theme of today's talk is let's get our time back and really understand what's going on there as far as not having to spend copious amounts of time writing policies and ensuring someone didn't subvert them. So I've talked a lot about kind of the operational high level. Let's get in a little bit deeper and do a side-by-side comparison that helps, I think, can communicate what we're talking about here. So we take about a traditional stack that you're probably familiar with. I know a lot of people are out there running VMware and ESXi. To get a hyper-converged solution there, you're going to need the hypervisor, you're going to need vSAN and NSX as their networking component. Now, Nutanix breaks that down a little bit differently. So we have our software-defined networking piece, which is based on OVS, OVN, and our AHV hypervisor. That's base level table stakes. Now we're talking about, okay, do we need more than just VM storage? Do I need to have a component like block services or file services because I'm going to do VDI on this? If that's the case, then I need to add third-party pieces on my stack on the left. Now with Nutanix storage, I've got block, file, and container built in. These are native storage services. And soon we'll have things like object I mentioned earlier. Then now we get to the management. So I need to have vCenter. I need to have updates. I need to, sorry, I got ahead of myself on that clicking piece. Let me build this out again real quick. So when we get to the management stack, management pieces, so I have a lot of these other components. So whether it's VROPS for operations management, VRA for automation orchestration, and other things beyond that, if you're in single sign-on and other pieces in that area. All of those management constructs, Nutanix compresses and converges, for lack of a better term, into Calm and Prism. Prism being the main management UI and Calm is a component of that, and we're going to have that talk coming up that covers Calm in more detail. So if I have all these other pieces that have their own independent software life cycles, and I have to manage each one of these things, the larger my organization gets, I've got to think about how do I scale my management. Do I need to add additional RAM, servers, CPU for these different components for automation and orchestration, for active intelligence, for basic updates, other pieces of basic management? Nutanix's general view is the same way we distribute our storage, we distribute our management. So as I'm scaling a Nutanix environment, the management piece is scaling along with it. It's natively highly available, so I have that availability structure here where I'm not dedicated down to one or two servers that if I lose those, I lose portions of my management. I'm not fractured out where I have separate management consoles for operations and orchestration or detailed analytics. That's really what we mean by don't manage the management. Simplifying the stack down to 3 large bins where most of my or all of my management falls under Prism, and then the virtualization and storage functions are underneath as part of the underlying HCI fabric, just changes the game from a virtualization infrastructure perspective, and definitely as we scale larger and larger, that becomes more and more apparent. Some external pieces, I'll just cover this real quickly from the IDC side. Going down this path, we've seen over a 60% cost reduction just from going to HCI alone, and then even greater reductions when you take out the cost of the virtualization stack. A lot of these, this is all built in from a Nutanix perspective. So I've covered a pretty big portion of what we're talking about from the value proposition here, and what usually ends up at this point is this sounds all very interesting, but I have never heard of Nutanix's hypervisor, or maybe Nutanix has only been in this hypervisor game for a short time. So what confidence do I have that my applications are going to work? And if you remember back to one of my earlier points, that was a big portion of that, is that all you should really expect, like when you go to cloud, is does my hypervisor work? So, let's make sure that, that does. And so the way we talk about that here is that our hypervisor AHV has its roots in KVM, which has been around for 10 plus years as well. So it's a pretty well-known and accomplished hypervisor. It does what hypervisors need to do. We've replaced all of the painful points of KVM with Prism, meaning that you don't have to know Linux or command line. Everything is elegant through a web GUI to make the management easy. And then broader than that, it has been blessed by major software vendors to ensure that it works. So we have something called Microsoft SVVP certification. That means all of the supported Microsoft Server and VDI desktop OSs are certified to run on AHV, and that brings along with it things like their enterprise applications like Dynamics and Exchange and SQL Server get blessed there as well. So certified Oracle ready, SAP NetWeaver blessed, the entire Citrix stack, including NetScaler, are blessed to run on Nutanix, which gives you an idea that all these things are there is the high confidence level that your applications are going to work just as you'd expect. And then the next part of that is, well, how do I get there? So if I'm interested in trying out Nutanix AHV, I want to get closer and closer to having a infrastructure that matches the public cloud, and we provide a lot of tools to do that. So within Nutanix, so if you're running another hypervisor, within our Prism management GUI, there is a one-click conversion that allows you to take existing cluster running a certain hypervisor and convert that over to AHV. It does that as a background process. Today, it does require a complete reboot. It's mainly meant for smaller clusters. Our 2.0 version of that is imminent, and that's going to do it as more of a rolling upgrade, node by node and VM by VM, which is a nice way to do things. And we also support something called cross-hypervisor DR. So maybe you're already a Nutanix customer running on ESX and you want to try out AHV for certain workloads. You can stand up a side-by-side cluster, maybe in a different site, and use our replication features, and we can replicate from one hypervisor to another. And all the required pieces are automated to get that done. You can just stand up, VMs that we're running on ESX on cluster A can be seamlessly moved over to cluster B to run AHV and move back. So the ability to move back and forth between those just through our replication technology is available there. And lastly, we have the larger scale management tools that we can use for this. And that's Nutanix Extract tools. And what Extract allows us to do, cover two things. From SQL migration, if you've got SQL servers running on bare metal or virtualized in any platform, it connects to those and can create and migrate the data, as well as deploy a best practice deployment of SQL Server on Nutanix. And then we have the VM migration tool that allows me to do something similar. It is a project-based where it can connect to multiple virtual center instances. You can choose which VMs you're interested in migrating. It does a transparent sync of the data in the background. And by that I mean you're not doing any, you don't have to shut anything down. It's using replication technologies from VMware and Nutanix to replicate all of your VM's data over to the new site. And then all you have to do is the cutover process. And that cutover process, when it tells you when you're ready, you pick the VMs you want to cut over. That data has already been completely synced, and then it does a shutdown on the ESX side and a power on the AHV side. It's as simple as that. It's a great tool, and I urge you to take a look at some of the demonstration videos that we have on our website. So before I go into the question piece, and to summarize really what I'm talking about here is that we see that in order to simplify the stack, virtualization needs to be just one more feature or service that's offered as part of that, and that's what we see in the public cloud environments. Whether that's Amazon EC2 or Azure, you're just getting a virtualization as a feature, and then you have storage as a feature, and that's what we're trying to align Nutanix to have, all the similar sets of feature pieces, and at the same time simplifying the management down to a very easy to use HTML5 interface that covers every aspect of the requirements, much like I get with public cloud. I don't need to go to other consoles. I don't need to use other tools. All the pieces are covered there. And when we talk about multi-cloud management in the column section, I think you'll see even more and more about this. So with that, I would like to open the floor to questions, I believe now, and I'm not sure if we're doing this over text or voice, but I'll let the operators let me know how we're going to do this.
Mike, this is Scott. We only have time for a couple of questions, but there's lots that came in, so I would encourage you to stick around after your session and maybe provide some answers for some of these folks. There's a couple of questions are around SQL Server, and you mentioned that is one of the key things here that I want someone to ask this question, and it's, can you run a clustered SQL Server that requires a quorum disk in a platform?
Yep, so that, as far as doing the clustering, we provide the storage service to allow that. So for the Microsoft clustering, we provide the disk shares that allow you to do that. So you can absolutely run a highly available clustered SQL Server on Nutanix, and that's really independent of the hypervisor. So you can do that today with VMware, Hyper-V, or AHV.
Another question is, can you just give us the 30-second overview of AHV Turbo?
Sure. So AHV Turbo is a optimization in the kernel, and that's that pass-through piece when I talked about performance. So if you look at traditional KVM, it would create a process per VM per vdisk in QEMU, And that wasn't all well threaded. And you've probably seen things where even like in VMware, we have to create, say, multiple SCSI NICs to enhance performance because these SCSI queues, iSCSI queues weren't deep enough. So what we did is, instead of making the onus in the virtual machines, either create multiple virtual disks or create multiple SCSI devices, is do that at the kernel level. And that's essentially what AHV Turbo does, is create a multi-queuing, multi-threading interface so that the hypervisor can take advantage of that low latency disk performance, and you don't have to worry about how do I can configure my OS to achieve that. So we've made it highly performant, strictly pass through, and the advantages are amazing. So even without next-gen hardware like NVMe and 3D XPoint, you're going to see an advantage. So then when you go to those technologies, it's even more so.
Excellent, Mike. We are out of time for questions, but there's lots that came in. We'll send in text for these folks. But thank you very much for this presentation.
You're welcome, and I will definitely stick around to answer those questions in the Q&A box.
And up on your screen for our audience, you should see a phone question. This is asking you how many people work in your company. We like to understand our audience makeup just because it makes our lives a bit easier as we look at bringing you more events and all that good stuff. And we also have a couple of prizes to give away. And I'm sure that two people are going to be very happy to learn that they've won a Nintendo Switch. Our first winner is Wayne Lawrence from Delaware. He is the winner of the first Switch. And Steve from Texas is the winner of the second Switch. And so it's very excited for those folks. So we'll be reaching out to you after the event, and we'll give you information about how to get your Switch. And for company size, it's always nice for people to see sort of where they fall in the crowd. So you can see that we've got lots of company sizes represented on today's event. And we're going to close the poll. Do we have Gil Heberman on?
Yes, good morning.
Thank you, Gil. It is your turn to go. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Really happy to share with you a little more details on Nutanix Com. I hear Mike mentioned this is part of where Nutanix is going and one of the new adjacencies that we're introducing. This is really exciting for us, and a really big component is part of our vision, materializing an enterprise cloud operating system for organizations. And COM speaks to both the notion of trying to drive towards cloud automation. That automation can really span any cloud, and driving towards an application ecosystem that can help organizations adopt processes in a more agile manner. So just as a little bit of background, what we're trying to do here, most customers today we hear are trying to drive towards better agility. And the Nutanix platform already does a great job in helping provision resources more quickly, driving better rapid time to market, really trying to bring some of the public cloud characteristics on-prem. But there are still a variety of challenges that customers face. The first is, of course, around an increasing number of application components and platforms that organizations have to support, microservices, Docker, new security policies. All of that has to be incorporated into application provisioning and lifecycle management, and that, of course, slows processes down. But beyond technology, what we're seeing is that actually the organizational and process-driven challenges are perhaps more significant. The first is that there are a lot of knowledge silos, basically a person or a team that has a specific knowledge or script in order to either facilitate a process or solve an issue. And without that person, that organizational knowledge is missing, and so it takes very long to resolve when problems occur. In addition, there's a lot of fragmented ownership. So if you look at, for example, a provisioning process, there are many handoffs that have to occur between server teams, networking teams, application teams. And those handoffs, although they appear to be not a big deal at small scale, once there's a bottleneck, the overall release time increases significantly, sometimes exponentially. And as a result, these bottlenecks become a major issue within the organization. Now, on top of that, there's now a need for driving these different processes not only on-prem, but also to other public cloud providers with the idea of consuming a hybrid cloud architecture. And of course, these, as you all know, these public clouds are fundamentally different platforms that don't really, they are not really inoperable, that are actually inoperable with what you have on-prem. So really, ideally, what we would like to do is build a way to automate the entire application stack, both on-prem, and then use the same control plane to automate processes across different platforms. And this is exactly what Nutanix Calm aims to do: provide full automation and lifecycle management for both the Nutanix platform as well as other public clouds, and in that way enable multi-cloud management. Now, with Nutanix, Prism is our management interface, and Calm is actually, from a UI perspective, is actually integrated into Prism. And so for you, it means that there is no new product to install or configure. It's simply another apps tab within the existing Prism interface. And so for customers, it's extremely easy to start and get going with Calm. I think that's an important thing to point out, because when you look at substitute or alternative solutions that have been out there to try to drive better application lifecycle management, one of the key issues or inhibitor to adoptions was extremely challenging route to actually starting and integrating into everything below, all the infrastructure components below. And so here, the fact that it's integrated, easy to get going with, can really help customers adopt fairly quickly. So Calm drives these three key value drivers. The first is an application lifecycle automation that I'll show you how you can go through and build. And then we build on that to provide self-service to different groups within the organization while achieving better governance. And all of that builds toward hybrid and multi-cloud management all in one solution. So really, the foundation of working with Calm is working with what we refer to as the blueprints, capturing or modeling all the elements of an application into a single file that includes both the VMs and the configuration associated with these VMs, as well as the binaries and the different policy components. So really, all the necessary steps that need to happen in order to facilitate a full process, for example, a provisioning process. So it means basically mapping both the VMs and their associated binaries and the different configuration, the different scripts that have to run in order to actually achieve the different configuration elements within each element. And so with that, building with dependencies towards an end-to-end operation that can be used by external parties. The way we do it with Calm is, of course, aside from writing things in command line, you can have a very intuitive and visual way to model these applications. And I'll show you a screenshot. And that is a really easy way to, again, get going very quickly in order to start facilitating the capturing or the modeling of these applications. And of course, the objective is effectively that if we can capture all of that in this blueprint, this end-to-end process with the different configurations from different teams, including networking and application teams, all coming together for this one end-to-end model, then it would really drive a repeatable process that, whether it's provisioning or lifecycle management, that can be automated and therefore very, very fast and reliable. So this is how a blueprint looks like. In white, you see the different components, in this case VMs. To the right of these VMs, you see the different steps that are needed in order to configure that particular VM, for example, a database or some kind of a web tier. And between them, you see the different arrows, and the arrows basically symbolize the dependencies, where we will not turn on a VM until a prior action has been completed successfully in the dependent VM. And so in that sense, you can see that you can really, on this simple canvas, start very easily to get going with Calm. And since we control everything below all the infrastructure, it's very easy to simply select, oh, I want this VM based on an existing image within the repository. And then on top of that, you can use existing scripts to be run as part of this process. So basically, in that sense, this blueprint aggregates all the organizational knowledge that you already have and really can be used to facilitate a single place where all the organizational knowledge is captured, so there is no more dependency on these knowledge silos, on these specific individuals or teams that actually have their script, their knowledge, either in their heads or in their computers. Now, once we model this application for provisioning, COM will also be used to create different actions on top of these applications. And some of these are out of the box, configuring or scaling, upgrading of the software, or removing the infrastructure. But also you can define your own actions. And the idea is to also automate these kind of routine and kind of mundane IT operations that can be very tiring, very time-consuming, and very error-prone, now can be automated very easily. So at this point, basically, we have a way to capture an entire process, provisioning or automating an upgrade or something of that nature. What COM also does is basically allow you as an IT operator to expose all these blueprints in a very easy to consume self-service manner. And the way we do that is through the Nutanix Marketplace. That is really the way to empower self-service. And again, this is out of the box. You already get a Nutanix Marketplace, and it's very easy to enable it to other users. And the idea is that those users are going to receive a one-click application provisioning. They'll see something like this App Store looking screen where they have specific options of launching applications that are based on their user and role. And so they'll be able to consume through here. And what happens when you instantiate one of these applications is basically we run the blueprint in the background in order to facilitate that end-to-end provisioning process. Now, I mentioned before, these users are going to only see the applications that have been assigned to them. And the reason that happens is because the same Prism role-based access controls, or RBAC, is going to be used to manage projects and groups and users for the Nutanix Marketplace as well. So the outcome is that IT can very easily define who can access which applications, and beyond that, everything going through Nutanix COM is basically documented and can be used for both auditing processes as well as understanding the resource consumption within the organization. So very easily, IT is able to get better governance, understanding who did what, when, and how much these groups consume. At first, it's going to be based on quotas, based on resource consumption, and soon after the initial release, will provide also a dollar amount, so organizations are able to see in dollar amounts who consumes and what kind of resources and when. Now, these blueprints that are part of the marketplace are published, of course, by IT, but beyond that, we're also going to offer pre-integrated blueprints to help organizations get going with these blueprints, especially with very common and commonly deployed applications. The idea here is that this would be something that you can get going very quickly with and easily configure for your specific organization. And so we're working with a variety of providers, and you will see coming out of the box both a variety of kind of traditional applications like the Citrix and the Veeams of the world, but also beyond that, we're working on a variety of open source kind of cloud native tools. We have a partnership with Google delivering Kubernetes blueprint, as well as other open source tools like MySQL and so on. So there's going to be a variety of different tools that you're going to enable and offer the different teams within your organization. So really the idea is gaining better governance and control, but on the other hand, driving towards frictionless delivery where basically the different groups consuming IT resources no longer need to go to public cloud in order to get provisioning processes streamlined or consuming resources quickly. It's now very easy to provide them with a one-click deployment and much better service while getting better governance. And so the model here is, instead of having an IT request that is kind of handed off between different teams, in this case OS team, DB team, networking team, instead of these different teams with different SLAs driving overall time, again, due to these bottlenecks, the idea would be to now move towards a model where a user submits a request in the marketplace. That marketplace is already ready with different components that have to occur, different steps that have to occur in order to facilitate the process, and that process is being automated in the background. Okay, so we have talked about how to kind of model the applications and then expose them as a self-service. Now the question is, how can we use all that for hybrid and multi-cloud management? And so here's the beauty. The COM blueprint, which, by the way, is extremely flexible in of itself. It ends up being just a JSON file that is extremely portable. That JSON file can be used based on COM configuration for either deployment on-prem or in the public cloud. We're going to support different public clouds over time, and the idea is that the same blueprint you configure in with all the steps can then be selected to be provisioned either in the Nutanix environment or through APIs in one of the public cloud providers. So we don't need to rewrite this blueprint, and it can be very easily used across different teams in IT and for different teams across the organization. Now, if you think about it, if we associate a dollar amount or cost to different components within a blueprint, then we would understand the overall cost of consumption of this blueprint. And as we do that for both these blueprints for on-prem deployment and off-prem deployment, we're able to basically see what is the overall cost of consumption both on-prem and in the public cloud. And when we talk to customers, this has become a really critical component, because often different groups consume public cloud resources on their own, and so IT has a very hard time understanding what is the cost and lack control of and visibility into what is happening across the organizations with public cloud consumption. So here, everything that goes through the marketplace with self-service is not only available to being audited and better understanding of who's consuming what, but you can actually visualize what is the dollar amount associated with these deployments. Over time, and shortly after the initial release, we're going to add enforcement mechanisms so you can control really how much different organizations can consume against the budget. Now, we ourselves are committed to, of course, we use COM internally, and we're really committed to driving innovation as fast as possible. And so what we're planning to do is basically deliver COM release in a more frequent basis, every 3 months or so. Always with Nutanix, you can upgrade in a non-disruptive manner, in a rolling manner. So you can be very comfortable with getting the latest release and the latest innovation very quickly. And this is what we're trying to do here. Have a very frequent release to make sure that the absolute latest is deployed in your organization as soon as possible. Okay, with that, I'll be happy to take a few more questions as much as time permits.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation. We do have time for a couple of questions. So one of the questions is, you may have mentioned this, I had to get disconnected to have an audio issue corrected. When is COM going to be released, or has it been released?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So we have announced COM a couple months ago, and it will be GA'd by the end of this year. And as I mentioned before, we're going to have a very frequent release cycle, so we plan to have another subsequent release early next year.
And on the upgrade side, you mentioned you're going to do upgrades every 3 months. Are those mandatory or are they optional?
Oh, they're absolutely optional. But again, what you'll see early on is we're going to add a lot of really good features, a lot of interesting things that can support both the on-prem automation as well as the multi-cloud management. And so the idea is just to be able to, again, get this innovation quickly to customers.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody. So go ahead and tell us what industry vertical you work in. We are going to give away a couple of more prizes here. And our next Switch winners are, Nintendo Switch number 3 is going to Tammy Hupper from California. And also representing California is Daryl Wong. Both of you have won Nintendo Switches. We have a couple more Switches plus the arcade to give away before the end of the event.
And that was a cheap shot. This is Mike Ronsky. I'm back on.
You are. We apologize for the audio issues that we've had. We're going to cut the audio provider out from this event. We're just going to use this number for the rest of the event. So we're going to show our poll results while David pulls our next Switch winner. And as soon as we have that name, then we will introduce you. Our next Switch winner is going to be Kevin Palmer from Florida. And we'll do an additional bonus Switch after this presentation. So, Mike, let's have you carry on.
Excellent. Thank you. And again, this is Mike Ronsky. I'm on the products team at Nutanix. And most recently, I've started to focus more and more on networking and security pieces. That's what we're going to talk about here as far as one more area to make sure that we're paying attention to our data centers and getting time back. The way I like to start off with talking about security is let's just go over quickly that defense in depth concept to make sure that we kind of frame this. And this is how we like to align what Nutanix is doing. So by defense in depth, for those of you who are not direct security practitioners, is we want to make sure that we're not just using a single fence or a single security posture. So if we go back, 10, 15 years, everybody was happy with, you had a firewall at the edge of your organization, maybe at the router, and you just assumed that everything on the inside was the good guys and everything on the outside was the bad guys. That's definitely not true anymore, and it hasn't been true for some time. And the concept of defense in depth is we want to make sure that we provide security layers at as many layers as we possibly can. So from the perimeter, and then we create more and more perimeters. So whether that's between, say, a DMZ from the edge of our environment to the inside, or between dev and test, or as I mentioned earlier in that conversation, hopefully you guys joined us for the AGV piece, between, say, application tiers. Excuse me, pardon me. So let's take this a little bit further. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm going to get into it a little bit more. So Nutanix takes a security as a first-class thing. It's not just an afterthought. So we aren't just giving you, here's our 200-page security hardening guide. We ship it all open, and if you want it secure, if you follow these 2,000 easy steps, you'll be in business. Well, we wanted to approach this differently, and a lot of this came from our customers, actually, and we had a large amount of federal U.S. government and foreign government customers as we started off. And they drove a lot of these requirements of the system. Is, if you really want to work in those environments, especially with, say, some of the secret agencies, security has to be upfront. It has to be part of your product and development. So we have a software development life cycle that takes security into play, meaning that we have internal code reviews. We build code with least privilege. We want to make sure that what we're doing simplifies our developers for security, because we just don't have a lot of extraneous things that would open up our security posture, and do that first, and constantly doing that. And so it's always being tested, validated as part of that. And then we took the external side, which is how we secure our platform. And there is a concept of a STIG, or security guide. And we took all that and we automated all these pieces to make sure that we can automate that hardening and do that as part of our software deployment and not as something manual expectation for our users. And not only the application is the auditing, but the same process can check for compliance as well as remediate. And then beyond that, we have a very vibrant security ecosystem. And so making sure that we provide the interconnections in our products to allow you to go beyond what Nutanix provides to extend out to these very domain-specific security vendors out there so they can provide you, that extended security posture. So looking at the software development lifecycle, what we're really talking about here is make sure that we minimize that attack surface, as I mentioned earlier, which is practicing defense in depth. All of our subcomponents are secured. Only we need to talk to each piece. Similarly, for those of you familiar with our structure of how we deliver HCI, we have this component called the CVM, which is a virtual machine that runs on every Nutanix node. So we talk about separation. With our next release, we're adding in one more area where we're able to completely segment all Nutanix proprietary communications between those CVMs and then management data completely segmented from VM data. So you have these three different layers where the Nutanix proprietary communication between nodes is independent of the managers and operators, which is also independent from the VM data. And while we're doing this as well, there's always going to be some new vulnerability. The hackers out there are trying to be one step ahead. You probably heard the concept of zero-day threats, and that means things that are released in the wild before anyone's had a chance to create remediation or patch against that. And the way you can fight some of these threats and the volume of them is make sure that your internal processes allow you for very quick release on the patching side. That's what we do. So we try to have a process allow that we find a security vulnerability in some component that we can issue that patch release very, very quickly, as well as guidance as soon as possible to make sure that you're covered in those areas. And the automated security baselines are an interesting piece. And we use a component internally today called SaltStack. So when we think about the non-Nutanix world, you deploy some massive stack, you install it, and then you consult each vendor. So we'll pick on the non-HCI traditional 3-tier. You're going to have a hardening guide from your server vendor, a hardening guide from your network switch vendor, a hardening guide from your storage switch vendor, hardening guide from your storage vendor or vendors, depending on how many you're using. And you'll have to mix all those together and apply those. And then you'll have to baseline that, document what you've done, make sure that none of those security constraints break the applications. Most of the time, those are going to be developed in a vacuum, right? What you deploy and secure storage vendor X, they don't know that you're mixing that with server vendor Y or fiber channel switch Z. So those combinations, there are a lot of testing that has to go on and credit that. And then if you're in a regulated industry, maybe that's healthcare or your government, you have to go through accreditation. That's a long, drawn-out process that requires a lot of manpower and possibly great expense, right? During all that time, what you're not doing is what IT exists for, which is delivering business applications and delivering business benefit. So when we take in the Nutanix path of securing these things as best as we can from the factory, meaning what we know about today, we can prevent and secure against, making that an automated process, and using that SaltStack piece again so that you can deploy that configuration, make sure you can audit it and set it back should someone change something. And by set that back, just give you some examples here. Let's say you wanted to do some data migration and someone intentionally opened up a firewall port to get access to the storage components as part of migration within Nutanix. And they forgot to secure that port. That security scan is going to go back through and notice these open firewall ports and lock them back down, or completely hardening it so that you can only use key-based authentication for remote access using something like SSH. Password complexity. Anyone adds or changes password complexity to remove your complexity rules. Or things like adding local users. All of that's noticed by this configuration guide and can be minimally alerted on, or ideally you leave the automation to secure and change that. And that's all provided in both a human readable form for what's baseline as well as in the audit side, and which gives you the benefits of being able to report that out to your auditors and things, so that accreditation process becomes much quicker. We hear from some of our federal customers that Nutanix was life-changing in this area. You can imagine they're very stringent on what gets on or off a government network, especially if there's government secrets involved. And when you can reduce that process, to days outside of months, it is a big deal for those. And really, this opens up this kind of government-grade security and hardening process to more and more of the traditional enterprise. So what these things look like in those derived controls, there is something called a STIG, or Secure Technical Implementation Guide. The concept of the STIG is developed by the US DoD and DISA. So we've taken their baselines and their processes. So they produce STIGs for things like the baseline OS. So for, say, a baseline Linux, Red Hat or CentOS, they produce it for the Apache web servers. And so we'll take any of those. If a STIG exists for a common component that we use in our product, we adopt that. And then we take those kind of standard application STIGs and combine them with our own guidelines based on how we deploy and essentially wire up our applications, provide a Nutanix specific technical implementation guide, and the net of those becomes the overall hardened, customized security baseline. And because this is all standards-based, there are tools out there that are used by various security products and as well as agencies that can consume this type of information in a programmatic way as well. So from a scanning and auditing perspective, making that part of your life additionally much easier than it would be without that. And because we're doing the full stack, again, covers everything from storage, the compute, then virtualization. The entire appliance is covered by this, not just one piece. And if you were, hopefully you were around for my AHV talk, we talked about the values of this integration piece. And because it is all one thing, this means this one large implementation guide does cover everything end to end, giving you a lot more time to do other things versus just having to spend a lot of time doing the security and hardening, and then or the fire drill when some security vulnerability comes out. So beyond infrastructure is where we started off with. Is what about in-product stuff? So I will build out this slide real quick here. And so what happens in general pieces, you've got the infrastructure, let's say, covered, and that process is running. We've got the automation I just talked about. Now we get into the broader piece of this is what can we do at the application level to make sure that my applications running on this infrastructure are also secured. So first place is that, make sure we're supporting all kinds of transit encryption. So should you have the need for key authentication and putting your own SSL keys within, say, the management stack, all of that is built in and automated so you can generate and sign your own keys or use a public key signature from a certificate authority to make sure that all of your management traffic to and from our management station is encrypted. Supporting multiple types of authentication here, so whether that's Active Directory or Open LDAP, that feeds into the role-based access controls, and combine that piece from the certificate side. And then on the federal side, there are the card access or common access card pieces are also available, covering the broad spectrum of different authentication types that are possible, as well as the ability to do cluster lockdown. So locking down things to the most secure method, meaning very, very limited access control to low-level infrastructure pieces. No one's just arbitrarily SSHing in without having done key exchange and key setup in advance as part of that. And then last area of this from the product capability, these basic features, is data at rest encryption. So data at rest is a big one, especially for things like financials. If you're doing healthcare and HIPAA rules, patient data, credit card data on the other side of the financial side. If any of that information is residing in your system, you probably have requirements from, whether it's U.S. government or foreign governments to ensure that data can't fall into the wrong hands. And data at rest encryption is a primary way of doing that. The most common way of doing data at rest encryption is using specialized hardware, the SED drive that are available in both spinning disk and flash. The challenge with SEDs, and sometimes this challenge goes into security in general, is SEDs can be 20+% more expensive than a traditional spinning disk. So there's a high cost or higher cost for doing that, which I would say is business justified, but as we all know, budgets and business justification don't always mesh. But something else that Nutanix provides is the ability to do that encryption in a software fashion, so that you don't need specialized hardware, but I can get the same FIPS 141-2 or 142-1, certifications from an encryption level without having the additional expense of dedicated or specialized hardware. And we think about the cloud scenario that I talked about earlier in the AHV talk. We don't want to create islands of infrastructure either. So being able to do things at a software level means that I can do this at a much more granular basis and take advantage of my broader pools of resources as opposed to having an island of infrastructure that's dedicated only for PCI or HIPAA. The data at rest encryption is a great one. For Nutanix, we support that across all hypervisors that we support. So whether that's ESX, Hyper-V, or AHV, you can do both the SEDs or the software-based encryption. Just as a note, software-based encryption is something that's in our upcoming release that we expect to be out imminently. We do the hardware-based encryption with SEDs today and have done so for a little while. So I'm speaking about this essentially in terms of it's going to be there very soon from the software side. So all of the expected key management is there. So we have external key managers, so you can pick a third-party key manager if you're already doing PKI or key management in your infrastructure. That's likely that the vendor that you're using is also Nutanix validated. And as a little hint at what's coming, we plan on providing our own internal-based key management. It'll be part of Prism for those applications and use cases where the only time you need key management is for this data at rest encryption in Nutanix. Therefore, you may not make a lot of sense to have a key management infrastructure broader than that. So we're going to be planning on providing that as a native feature of Prism as well. Role-based access control is pervasive in our next release. So this is going to give you the ability to really segment down your infrastructure to those who have a need-to-know basis, whether that's operators having the ability to do the full range of operations against virtual machines, or maybe help desks only having the basic idea of being able to power on, power off VMs. That's the kind of infrastructure segmentation we're talking about here. And this flows from the model we've chosen, and what we're doing going forward is this flows into our APIs as well, so that it's not just the GUI or UI version through Prism that's going to do this role-based access control. We wholly expect to expand this concept out to all API access, so that even if you're extending Nutanix with your own homegrown portals or third-party applications, there's no way to subvert that role-based access control. You still have fine-grained control over what those third-party tools or additional pieces can access and have control and governance over within your environment. That's that principle I just talked about here. So it's principle, role, and scope. You'll be able to define this, and in the concept of making sure it's easy. It's not. That's probably one of the areas that we spend a lot of time on. You'll hear Nutanix maybe too much use the term one-click, and what we mean by one-click, that's our philosophy of where we can automate, meaning remove the bonus completely from the user to have to worry about that, or where we can't automate, make sure we make it as easy as possible. So if we can conceptualize these kind of role-based access control policies down to a drag-and-drop GUI environment where I can show what users can have, visualize that relationship really well, so I can understand those policies when I read them, as well as create them. It's going to, it's just life-changing from a deep, complex policy perspective. We've had tools that go back as far, and I'll date myself when I mention things like TACACS on Cisco boxes. Very good at making security policies, but really, really complex to manage. So what ends up happening when things are complex to use is people don't use them, or they don't get the full benefit out of it. So what we want to do is make sure that what we implement from a security access control perspective, it is as easy as use as possible, so that you're going to be able to leverage the breadth of that security without too much onus on the person, or creating domains and silos of configuration where there's only one guy that knows how to do or manage something. Which is a good transition, I think, into the network side of this, which I believe is one of the more interesting areas. So what we're introducing is this VM microsegmentation. This is VM to VM low-level policy control. So every port protocol, you can imagine a full state for firewall at the VM level. That in itself, I wouldn't say is overly innovative or interesting. Everybody's known how to build firewalls for a long time. But the innovations here are when we leverage this virtualization and contextual knowledge about the virtual machine that it gets really interesting. So if you consider that the hypervisor knows the MAC address, it knows the IP address, it knows how many NICs are in a VM, it can determine all those identifying network properties. So the hypervisor knows the right IP for that VM. It knows the NICs pieces. So when I write my policies, I'm not expected to have an enumerated list of IPs. I just write, this group of VMs is allowed to talk to this group of VMs over these ports. So maybe that's only over SSL. So I'm going to allow TCP port 443, for example, between group A and group B and nothing else. And as VM provisioning goes on, so maybe that's not the default admin, we've gone to self-service, we've got a cloud-like model, I'm letting my application owners provision. They don't understand the rules of dev versus test versus DMZ. They just want to provision to VM. And they can provision away. They don't care about what they're doing as far as notifying anybody from the security team. They don't need to send somebody a list of IP addresses and get them whitelisted or blacklisted or these ports and protocols opened. Someone else has already written those policies within the Nutanix framework, and they can just provision and go. And the interesting thing from the security team's perspective here is that nothing that individual guest OS owner can do to subvert the policy. So if I'm the Windows admin and I log in over RDP and I get access, I can create new virtual NICs. I can change the IP addresses. Guess what? The hypervisor sees it and the policy addresses. The policy adapts immediately. That's a huge benefit. And without this kind of infrastructure where you're tying that from security to the virtualization tier, in the past, someone with root access to Linux or admin access to Windows could do things to get around security controls. This is a much more omnipotent process. It does not allow that to happen. In that same vein of making things simple, we don't always know what's going on between applications. You can read copious manuals for application A, B, and C to try to determine, what ports and protocols are required for function and communication. Maybe documentation is not up to date. Maybe, didn't read the right version. What we provide is the ability to visualize that communication between the virtual machines. When you're writing policy, if you don't really know, you can just say, let me take a look at this set of VMs and how they talk to the other set of VMs and watch that traffic between the two. You'll get a nice graphical view, and I apologize, it's not really clear on this slide. But that graphical view shows you all of the communication going on. And if you've gone through the process of vetting and validating that's the right communication, then you can make that the policy, and then anything outside of that communication is anomalous, and you can decide that's going to be blocked or logged as non-approved traffic. Which is, that really does change the game into making it very easy to write and manage these policies, even when you don't have domain expertise in that application. As a note, as far as availability on this, this is coming up in that next release. We're going to show this in tech preview first. So in that 5.5 is the planned next numbering of the next release that's imminent. That's where you'll start seeing the microsegmentation and network visibility within that. So one more thing to cover here is, okay, this is all great with Nutanix. I love your microsegmentation, but I'm a Palo Alto shop, or I use vendor XYZ for my security. What can Nutanix do here? So leveraging a similar function, we'll pick on Palo Alto as an example. We also provide the availability to integrate with other network security virtual appliances or non-security based. So that could be say application performance monitoring or other packet capture reasons. But what it means is I can insert my own services. So I've got a virtual appliance for Palo Alto out there, and I can, through network policy, similar to the way I wrote my firewall rules, to say all of the database traffic I want to reroute through this Palo Alto, or maybe I'm only going to reroute the traffic that's transcending lines. So it's going to go through my DMZ. If it's DMZ traffic, I want to route all of this VM's traffic through the Palo Alto and not just use the Nutanix less level rules. So now we're getting both maybe that next-gen firewall concept, or IPS, IDS can be inserted here, or other virtualized network functions from the insertion and chaining perspective. And that not just one, it could be multiples, because you may have some that are just, like I said, application-based for performance and others that are security-based. You can chain them all together through simple policy language and build these groups together. So very specific details between what's happening between web tier and database tier, and reroute that through the those Palo Alto firewalls. A real quick logo slide. This is available on our website, constantly changing, that shows you some of the vendors. And I apologize if I missed a vendor that's your favorite. There's probably a lot more than this, but I just wanted to give you an idea that we do have a number of ecosystem vendors. As I mentioned in my AHV talk earlier, it's 50 plus vendors that are validated against AHV in total, and a number of those are in that network security space. So look for your favorite vendor here, and you'll probably find them, or they'll be coming soon from the security perspective. So to recap, what we mean and why Nutanix we think is going to help you out on those principles of security, defense, and depth. We start off with a secure, hardened platform from factory. We've automated all the compliance and healing to make sure it stays that way. We've implemented role-based access controls, data at rest encryption, some very, very detailed network policy from our microsegmentation and visibility. And lastly, an open API system that allows you to integrate with those third parties that you deem are necessary to complete your security story and your security policy. And with that, I thank you for your attendance, and I think we turn this over for some questions.
Mike, thank you very much for that presentation, and thank you again for bearing with us in that bit of a snafu. We have a number of questions from the audience, and while we're asking these questions, I'm going to put up our next poll question that we have for our audience. And here it is. So, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. I'll do a poll question. There we go. How large is your IT staff? This is often interesting to see what people are working with. You already answered the first question, which is when will microsegmentation ship? You said it's coming with 5.5 in a preview mode. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it will be in tech preview. We do this quite often with new features that we think we would like customer feedback on. So 5.5 is imminent, should be out very soon. I can't give you anything more specific than that, but we sell no wine before it's time. So it is just about done with all the QA ready to go, and when that comes out, you will have access to run microsegmentation and play with that. Now, this is AHV only, so I encourage you, if you heard the AHV talk earlier, the microsegmentation piece is for AHV.
Got it. So the other question that somebody asked is, will any of these features be available in Community Edition for testing purposes?
That's a great question, and I think I should have brought that up with AHV earlier. So Community Edition, for those that aren't aware, is essentially a free version of Nutanix that you can run on hardware that you already have. Doesn't run on everything, but if anything, it's more modern with recent drives. As long as you've got some flash and spinning disk, you've got a good chance of running that. Our general goal with Community Edition is to make sure that we release all the same features. So we'd like to 100% parity with our current GA. So it is my expectation that right after we release this 5.5 release, shortly after, we will have an update to Community Edition that will definitely include the microsegmentation feature.
We've had a gentleman ask a number of questions around federal compliance throughout the event, and we haven't had time to ask them, but the question here is, would security meet any FIPS standards, particularly 140-2? And in general, when we talk about AHV and all this other stuff, how suitable is it for federal use?
Very suitable. Just as an example, our largest federal customer is running about 1,800 Nutanix nodes. All of those are AHV today, and that is in a secure organization, so they follow the security standards there. No problem at all. In fact, like I mentioned when I first started my talk, is that our federal customers contributed quite a bit to a strength of Nutanix, which is our security play and how we configure and deploy our secure standards. So I think you'll have no problem there. The specific 140, the FIPS question, absolutely. That's level 1. Level 2 requires tamper-proofing, so we're not providing anything on the tamper-proofing side, but from the data at rest encryption, you can definitely get the level 1 on the FIPS compliance. And this is validated and certified FIPS, by the way.
And there's always a perennial question around when we hear about new features, is there going to be an additional cost for microsegmentation, the module?
As of now, that is the answer to that question. The short answer is going to be yes, but those details are still being ironed out. So I can't provide anything more than that, but like everything else, we typically allow a taste and so that you can use and try out features without incurring cost. But in production, the current plan is there will be an additional cost for microsegmentation.
Excellent. Mike, thank you so much for your presentation. It's really appreciated, and thank you for being on our event today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate the time and everyone spending time with us, and everyone have a great holiday.
Thank you very much, Mike. And we have 3 more switches that we're going to give away right now. The second bonus switch that we're going to be giving away, thanks to our little audio snafu, is going to Mark Tuff from Massachusetts. Congratulations, Mark. Our normal switch, 5th switch winner, which is now the 7th switch, is going to be to Raj Singh from Minnesota. And our 3rd switch for this portion of the event goes to John Martin from Georgia. We're going to continue on here in just a second. And we're going to be hearing now from some pretty awesome stuff here to wrap up our event. We're going to have the stuffing. We should probably have the dessert, but everybody likes stuffing too. We're going to talk about applications mixed in with hyperconvergence and what that means. And joining us for this discussion are Sibo Atema, who is the IT systems engineer at Weatherskip Crispon, and we have Greg White, who is the enterprise application solutions team at Nutanix. Sibo and Greg, please take it away.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I'm hearing you fine.
Okay. Great. And there's Sibo. Yes, thanks so much for the introduction. We're excited to be here. I've spent the last 15 years trying to help people like you find solutions to your application, data, and storage challenges. I've got Sibo Atema from Weatherskip Friesland, who will be talking here in a few minutes. And really, I want to devote the bulk of the time to him because he is one of those rare people that just really understands Nutanix. He uses it every day in what he does in his work and really brings some great insight. And one of the great things we love to do at Nutanix is just let the people that use Nutanix talk about it, let our customers do that talk. And what I'm going to do is take a few minutes here, and I'm going to let him tell you more about himself here in a few minutes. I'm going to take just a few minutes and do a level set to make sure for those that are just coming in for this session and may or may not know Nutanix very well, just taking a couple minutes to lay out why Nutanix is great for enterprise applications. The things that we like to talk about are how the cloud has reset expectations in IT. More and more customers and organizations out there are looking for ways to have that public cloud experience on-premise. They want to be able to have that rapid innovation, that fractional growth in IT consumption, and really be able to do it simply and remove a lot of that complexity. In order to do that, Nutanix really worked hard to change the dynamic of how infrastructure is delivered through hyperconvergence and removing all that complexity of the different layers and steps and all the things that have to be done that used to have to be done to create an environment, and then be able to scale that out and grow it over time in this appliance-based approach that combines those different layers of storage, networking, compute, and virtualization so that you can really just focus on the applications. And that's what we're going to spend time talking about is you don't have to worry about the infrastructure. It's designed to be able to handle the different workloads you've got in your environment all through a single platform, and we're going to really talk about that. And so if you look at those different layers that come together to create that public cloud experience, we talk about it as an enterprise cloud because it can be hybrid, it can be on-prem, it can be distributed out at remote sites, and there's the key pieces of the compute and the storage and the network we've talked about in the virtualization. There's also all that layering of the management, the one-click operations like Mike was talking about in there and the security, but also the ability to rapidly roll out applications, to be able to manage them across multiple clouds, all combined together into that Nutanix operating system, enterprise operating system, and to deliver that enterprise cloud. And just to give you a sense for those that aren't really familiar with how this looks in architecture, you see you've got a node-based approach where you just add more nodes, your hypervisor, and then your VMs, containers, all with a Nutanix controller VM in there that manages the data path. And what makes this really important for applications is that ability to have local storage for your applications, so your data is local and not having to go across storage area networks into a fiber channel SAN or some other kind of SAN. Having that data local is what allows you to have that great kind of performance. Having that pool of data across, pool of storage and resources across multiple nodes is what allows you to also easily expand, easily adapt to different types of workloads. So we talk about with customers about how easy it is to run different kinds of workloads, not only high transactional database workloads, but also batch workloads all together on the same platform because of this flexibility in the approach and how we do that. And to be able to provide those other enterprise class services that are needed to go with important applications like your Oracle, your SAP, your SQL, your Exchange and SharePoint, all those important applications and more, big data like Splunk and Hadoop, those are all, and I'll talk just about that as I kind of wrap it up. But being able to run all of those together on a single platform using and having the data protection, the resiliency, the redundancy built in this node-based approach to be able to ensure that you've reduced the risk of having downtime. Being able to upgrade with a one-click approach and do that where you're not going to have to deal with downtime is important because of the importance of keeping these applications that are critical to your organization up and running. We do that across not only, I talked about some virtual workloads, but containers, bare metal applications. I clicked on that a little quick, sorry. Is another big aspect. You may have some physical, virtual, or Oracle servers that you need to bring into. You'd love to bring the storage into your Nutanix environment. You may not be able to virtualize that particular server. It may be new, and you're not ready to retire it yet. But being able to have the data within Nutanix and then be able to bring it in later if you want, or kind of keep down that path. It just gives you more flexibility, as well as, now being able to do the file services piece as well. And so to wrap things up, as I bring Sibo on, just think about there's a lot of different workload opportunities that can exist on Nutanix because of this flexible approach, the node base, the being able to run all flash, mixed, hybrid, depending on the workload needs, being able to have storage heavy nodes so that you can manage licensing costs. You can easily adapt to different work types that are needed. And so now, Sibo, I'd love to invite you to just talk about your environment and how you use Nutanix and what your experience has been. And at the end, we'll take questions and go deeper.
Yeah. Hi, Greg. Thank you. I'm hoping you're hearing me well, because some operators said that the popping is coming from my connection from the Netherlands. So, yeah.
You sound
I hope
good. So,
okay.
Yep, I can hear you loud and clear.
So, I'm a customer. We're talking more about our mixed environment and how we use Nutanix. Let's give it a start. My name is Sibo. I'm working at Wetske Friesland for more than 2 years now. I'm working in a team of 6 system engineers, and we are responsible for the whole IT. I'm also happy to be proud to be part of the Nutanix Technical Champion 2070 program. The Champion program is a truly global program, and it is composed of IT professionals from every cloud, application groups, and technology. Our free community group are committed to new ways of thinking that will enable my organization to deliver on business outcomes. So I will do some presentation about our experience, what I said earlier, and how we manage the business critical apps on Nutanix. What I said earlier, I came from the Netherlands. It is a water country. We are surrounded by water. The Netherlands knows 12 provinces, and Friesland is one of them. Here I live, and we have a lot of water here to manage. So we are trying to keep the water below sea level for making pipes, for example, to make sure that our land is not flooding. And even rain can cause problems. So the water in the rivers rise when it will not go away by themselves. So we have to help, and as Wetske, we need to pump all the extra water back to the sea. Also, we have water pumps in the country to pump the smaller ditches empty. We also are responsible for the sewage treatment. It is also an important part of Wetske Friesland. And we purge all the clean and all the puke and urine until it is clean water, and it will go back to the rivers. Yeah, we all accomplished this with 700 employees. We are a local government, and people pay taxes for our service. So we have 3 important tasks for our citizens: to take care of the safety, take care of the sufficient drink water, and to make sure that there is clean water. So our IT is important to support all the tasks. We have multiple locations and employing different kinds of people, like laboratory staff, our own technical service for maintenance, who do process automation, field engineers, and geographical information engineers. So yeah, except for our infrastructure environment, the process automation do a lot of PLC programming, logical controls to manage all the pumps or other stuff in the province. Yeah, to support the business processes, we need to work with a various set of applications. Maybe you will recognize the first one, like SharePoint, Exchange, and Oracle, but I don't know who of you knows the S3 products, like S3 ArcGIS, Deltaris, HydroRK, Morphin, Sobek, for example. So some of those applications are business critical, and we call them the grown jewels. Grown jewels have a different service level agreement than the regular applications by us. So we need an infrastructure who is flexible and easy to manage to serve the customer at every level. To support the business with all of their business application, we used a VMware platform with an EMC Phoenix NAS SAN S storage, but it is too complex. It is not the VMware management what was the issue, but this is most likely the storage systems and the fiber switches. We need if we need a new LUN or change some attributes of a LUN, for example, enable compression, we need to do a lot of steps to make this happen. And the multiple management interfaces makes the management complex, and we need professional business partners to help us out when we need to do maintenance on this platform. But yeah, that's not all the infrastructure we have at the moment. I was trying to make some presentation to make our infrastructure environment understandable for everyone. So I was thinking, let's place every brand of what we have on one slide. So first of all, we have some Microsoft products. And yes, you see two Exchange servers. We are now migrating the Exchange 2010 environment to the Exchange 2016, who is running on Nutanix at the moment. We have a bunch of Citrix products, who is also virtualized on the VMware. Some networking stuff. We have some infrastructure, and the rest to make our environment complete. And for 2 years now, we have added Nutanix to our environment. So the story begins for us. The business wants a new workplace concept. Everyone needs to work flexible and work from home, anywhere, any place, anytime. So the dream of every management was, if you ask me, the dream. We were using the XenApp platform with a lot of physical desktops. With XenApp we had before, we could cover the 60% of all the employees to work flexible. Only the desktop users need a new desktop concept. So the best solution was to make an VDI environment. Because we had already a Citrix licenses and experience with Citrix, the first choice was to implement the Xen desktop. So for this, we need some infrastructure. Wetske Friesland is a government organization, what I said earlier. So we have to purge a framework contract with one vendor for all our hardware. So the fastest way was to ask Dell, our hardware contractor, what kind of options we had for a VDI environment. Of course, we had some demands like simplicity in the management of the environment, high availability, where the standalone server was not the best option for us. And how many IOPS do we need, and how many IOPS can provide our Phoenix EMC SAN? I don't want to go back to Citrix provisioning services because it is an extra management layer that we don't want. So a hyperconverged cluster was the best option for us, and this was the Dell XC system with Nutanix on it. We had also two old VMware clusters running with old hardware. So within 1 year, we need to replace this hardware with new one. So Nutanix advised us to make a mixed cluster with VDIs and servers on the same cluster. So the hardware was strong enough and fast enough, they said. So, okay, we already had a budget to replace these old two clusters. So, yeah, the money we spent on the Nutanix cluster, we could spend for this. So, yeah, what's the plan, and how we does how does the Nutanix cluster looks like? Yeah, this was our plan. We have two separated data centers because we have Cron jewels with a single application server. So Metro functionality was necessary. Metro is the real-time synchronization for data. So we have an RPO. We need an NVIDIA grid card. Metro vGPU support was not ready within the Acropolis release those days of Nutanix. So yeah, we had to choose an VMware as hypervisor. The whole cluster is a mixed environment with VDIs and server applications in one. And we separated some workloads to the DRS rules, for example. Yeah, and what's running now on Nutanix those days? We have a lot of business applications running smoothly, and we are still adding new workloads to Nutanix in our mixed environment. For example, we are planning to virtualize the Oracle next year. So if you have questions about some workload you see, you can always contact me, and maybe we can exchange some these and experience. Our environment is now running 500 VDIs, 200 server VMs with Windows, and some of the Linux server VMs, I guess. The Extend Desktop environment is running very smoothly on our Nutanix cluster. It makes us very happy. When I make new VDIs or update some, it is done in several minutes. It's in several mouse clicks. So after the upgrade or creating new VDIs, it takes some minutes to have it all completed, and within that's all because the high I/O of the Nutanix. So the speed is very amazing. When the VDIs are starting, it takes not too long when the OS is ready for the user. For the non-persistent desktops, we have a shadow cloning technology within Nutanix, and we didn't do anything for that. It was enabled for us. So Nutanix is aware of my non-persistent virtual machines. In our environment, we make two containers on Nutanix, one container for the non-persistent VDIs and one for the persistent VDIs. So we can enable compression for the non-persistent VDIs, and for the persistent VDIs we have a deduplication, what was the best practice for us. And also the shadow cloning, so my VDI is running on one host, and the master VM. The master VM is also running on the same host where my VDIs are running on. So I have local data. Where can what I can use? The Exchange server. Unfortunately, we didn't do anything special for the Exchange server to run on Nutanix. Only maybe one thing, that's the storage of the database and logs. And we separated this on different disks and placed it on a separate data store. So in Nutanix, I did one mouse click, create a new data store. It automatically pops up in the VMware, and I can place my logs or DB containers in that particular data store. So that was a lot of easy to do for me, and I don't need a business partner to do it because I don't have any experience with the storage pads and fabric switches, and Nutanix is really easy for me. Yeah, and at last the SharePoint deployment. It works like a charm. What I said in my presentation. We deployed our SharePoint platform on the same shared storage where all our VMs are running on. So we have one data store, the locally data store without Metro, and I'm thinking I'm running some 200 or 150, 200 VMs on the same data store and without performance issues. So yeah, had this because we separated the whole cluster of SharePoint, the software what they had inside of SharePoint. So yeah, that's my presentation for today. Thank you. Maybe there's time for some questions.
Picking up just a little bit there, you just said you're done and you're ready for questions. Is that right?
Ready for questions, yes.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, so there are a couple questions on here. I did see one that was about how many virtual desktops are you running on your stack?
I'm running now 500 virtual desktops, and it's probably 60 persistent and the rest non-persistent
Right
desktops.
now.
And yeah, and the workload is for a lab environment or for a standard work environment, and the graphical environment where we're running applications like AutoCAD or some other graphical applications.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, we have 500 VDIs with a various set of workloads. So we have a 90 VDIs of with a graphical card, where we're running Autodesk, for example, and other graphical applications. And the rest is standard workloads for example the lab environment where our lab users are working on, and all kind of business stuff. So yeah, that's our
that 500 concurrent? Is that 500 concurrent desktops, or is that 500 in total that you may use in pools here and there?
No, it is not. We have a licensing of 370 concurrent, but I have replaced some reserve to for maybe in a data center failure or something. So we have a lot of more capacity in reservation on both sides, so we can handle a data center failure.
And when you look at your Nutanix nodes, are they all flash or are they hybrid nodes?
How do you mean?
Yeah, can you maybe you can ask that?
Yeah, are they all? Yeah, are they? They're both mixed hard drive and solid state drive, or all flash? I think you're mixed, right? Or did you move to all flash?
It was no. We purchased it 2 years ago, so the all flash notice was not a part of the Nutanix products yet. So we have 4730 hosts. We have 4 SSDs and 6 data disks. Yeah, so in hybrid.
How many nodes in total do you have, Thibaut?
We were beginning with 4 with a proof of concept, and we expanded to 12. And now those days we have purchased 6 new nodes, so we have 18 in total.
And when you're looking at you're running Exchange in the environment as well. So tell us about how it's performing with your. I believe you said 700 users.
Yeah, we have 700 users on Exchange, but it is not really fair because we are now migrating the old Exchange 2010 environment where a bunch of users is still on it and it is not on Nutanix, and the new Exchange environment, the 2016 Exchange is running on Nutanix, and there is I think now some 100 people on it. So we have not migrated all the users yet.
When you look at your VDI environment, and can you briefly tell us sort of, are these, do you have pretty much line of business users on these, or do you have knowledge workers, or do you have even engineering teams using it with some high impact applications?
Yeah, so you mean the system engineers has another workload than other users, or?
No, the
How do you
question
mean?
is specifically, do you have engineering groups that have high I/O and high performance requirements in the VDI environment as well, or is it primarily your standard desktop where it's knowledge workers?
Yeah, but that's one point we didn't get on it. The questions of our users is not that they ask VDIs with a bunch of IOPS. The workload we are running, what I see in the statics, it is not very how do you say exciting. So no, we don't have users that is taking many IOPS because all the workloads is not in the VDI itself, but it's most likely on the server VDI server VMs.
Taking that as we're good. Steve, thank you very much for being here with us today. Appreciate that insight into how you're using the Nutanix solution.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah.
If there was some time, I can maybe show something about our environment and what our data source is and how our environment is running. But it's most likely a short demo. But I don't know if it is work, but and I don't know if there is time. So it's all up to you.
Yeah, we can. I think it'd be good for the audience. Go ahead and try it. If we have any technical issues, we'll end it. And we'll go from there. So this was definitely not something we had rehearsed. And we'll maybe spend 3 to 5 minutes on it.
No. It's most likely 1 or 2 minutes. I will show something about our environment and how we have installed it on Nutanix itself. So it's only the person interface I will show. Okay. Let's see. I have the plugin installed.
You know how to do that. Did you already install the plugin?
Yeah, and everything.
There we go.
Now, so I guess you are seeing something now. We have 2 data centers. We call them the DCF1 and the DCF2 for data center Friesland. And we have also enabled the Prism Central, and now we have 102 terabytes of space on every data store on every data center. So there is some grow we can handle. For the storage, we have make multiple storage containers, and most likely we have the 2 database container and the log container for the Exchange, with one with compression and the other one without anything. And if I want to change something, what does not happen very often, I can enable it on demand. So that's great for me. Let's see. We have more of the VDI. So I have the non-persistent local data storage only accessed by the data center, the host of the data center itself, and we have the replica container within Metro. So I can access this container on both sides. So on both sides, all the hosts can read and write on this container. So yeah, sometimes it is that one VM is coming up the standby side. So it's running on the standby side instead of the primary side. So Nutanix is warning me that one remote VM is not on the active side. So that's fine. And that's very cool that Nutanix helps me to manage my environment. So yeah, there's not a lot of what I do within Prism. In the last feature we have, I'm now running the 5.1.2. There is that I can manage all my VMs within Prism. All my VM within ASXi can I now manage within Prism, and I can also, I guess, popping the console, and voila, it is even faster than I open the console within VM vCenter itself. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, I will leave it for now. So then I will go back to the presentation and stop this. So yeah, that was a short demo of our environment, and I'm pretty happy with it. So yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve, for the presentation and for the demo. We really appreciate your being on our event today.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
And thank you, Greg.
Yep.
And we have our last poll question for the audience. While we have this poll question up, we're going to be giving away, maybe we can give away one more prize. What do you think? So we want to understand which of the presentations really resonated with you the most today. You can select as many as you like. You can select one. You can select none. You can select all four. So for our awesome grand prize winner, like I said, I'm jealous. Let's go to California. So if you're not in California, sorry. The grand winner is going to be Benjamin Mariscal from California. Benjamin will be reaching out to you immediately after the event, shortly after the event, to arrange for getting this device shipped to your house. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. Thank you for bearing with us through some minor technical issues. It's one of the great things about presenting to IT people is they get it. And we thank you all. We hope you all have a great Thanksgiving and holiday season. And once again, we look forward to seeing you on more of our events in the next few weeks. Thank you so much, everyone.